Interviewing the great Shawn Thunder Wallace. For anybody who has not heard of this cat yet, you are in for a real treat and truly a great saxophone lesson, as well as just music and life lesson from all the things that we talked about in this interview. I first became aware of Shawn in the mid-2000s when I was working on cruise ships and saw some of his instructional videos online and just knew that he was going to be a great teacher and mentor for me. This cat has done it all. He has performed on national television multiple times. He is a great arranger, composer, plays just about every instrument that you can imagine. And not only does he play these instruments, but each one of them he is extremely proficient on. In the year 2009, I got to attend the Ohio State University and studied with Shawn for 2 full semesters. Got loads of information that I'm still sorting through today. I attribute many of the things that I learned about music theory and improvisation, and more specifically advanced improvisation, to this man, Dr. Shawn Thunder Wallace. He has taught me so much about music and life. I hope you get inspired by listening to what he has to say. I know that I always am, and am so thankful for his presence and guiding force in the world. Check out this interview all the way to the end. You'll see why. Dr. Shawn Thunder Wallace, thank you so much for doing this interview with me. Really looking forward to asking you these questions and just appreciate your time.
Absolutely, man. It's good to see you.
Likewise. So yeah, the first thing that I'm always curious about with, the people that inspire me is your roots. What was your first light bulb moment as an improviser, and how did that lead to your decision to become a professional musician?
Yeah, so a lot of that is I had to interview my dad to figure out the answer to some of that, because my dad was my teacher all the way until I went to college, and I started very young. My dad was a great saxophone player. I heard him playing around the house, and my dad, he loved Lou Donaldson. And I keep saying this, but I haven't done it yet. But there's a tape over there on the wall, got a big cassette tape. And I know people don't know what cassette tapes are anymore. But there's a bunch of cassette tapes over here on the wall, all kinds of stuff. One of the tapes that I have there is of my dad playing, and I keep intending to transcribe it and then present it to him, put it in finale and dress it up or something, put it in a plaque or something, because my first inspiration was my dad, very much so. And he had a very specific strategy approach to teaching. We played classical and jazz stuff side by side. We played stuff by ear. We played stuff, that was written. I can't take credit for this. I just wanted to practice. I wanted to play. He never called it practicing, though. He said, go get your horn and let's play.
Yeah.
Right? So he sort of, that whole playful kind of thing that kids have, I started when I was 6. My dad designed a saxophone stand. He called it sophisticated racing stand, because remember, I'm 6, right?
Right.
And he designed it so that it could be placed on the top of a piano bench, and was the ideal size for me to walk up to. And the piano bench in the stand he created, made out of wood, supported the weight of the instrument. It's like a 1920s Con Alto that I still have with the tuning wheel, silver-plated, super heavy horn, actually. So that's what I did. And at first I couldn't handle very much, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but before long, that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to play. I wanted to play the instrument. I think I discovered really early, because I started composing when I was 7, that music was going to be something that I could express myself, create things that didn't exist. It was like, I think a lot of the sense that young people get today by playing video games and sort of conquering things and like puzzles and especially the sort of, the sort of video games that have like different worlds that you conquer and different sort of, you have the end boss, and you conquer that boss and you get to the next level. A
Right.
lot of that stuff was being satisfied by just playing the instrument, except for the great benefit of the skills that I had gained actually transferred into something that I would be able to benefit from for a lifetime.
I always, when I got to study with you, people watching this may know, because I always talk about it and I attribute a lot of the things I know about music theory to getting to study with you. But I always felt like you were like a father figure when you were showing me a lot of those things. It was like deeper than taking saxophone lessons on some level, just because of the nature of the guidance that you were showing me. Okay, so two questions actually. Those recordings that you said that you have, that's with your dad playing with Lou Donaldson?
No. That's he really liked Lou Donaldson. He sounded like Lou Donaldson.
Gotcha.
He sounded like Lou Donaldson. But my dad played with a lot of great musicians. He played with Doc Severinsen, played with a lot of big artists. Cannibal Adderley and his band, including Nat Adderley, were hosted for dinner at my grandmother's house, my dad's mother.
Wow. That's awesome.
So stuff like that. My dad actually played with Bobby Floyd because, so here's the thing that's interesting. Bobby Floyd, the great piano player, Ohio native, lives in Columbus, has been here for several years, plays with the Columbus Jazz Orchestra, plays with everyone, played with the Basie Band, world-class talent. He's younger than my dad is, but they played together in a group in the 70s. And so now it's kind of full circle. My dad grew up in Columbus, so did my mom. My dad was born in Columbus. I was a musical director at a church in town, and I didn't realize this, but it was a church that my dad used to attend. It was a church that my mother was baptized in, and it was a church that my dad's adopted father was a deacon at. And so there's like a lot of interesting sort of connections in this town. I was born in this town, actually, but I grew up in Michigan. But I play with Bobby all the time. It's very rewarding and a lot of pinch yourself kind of moments.
Definitely. Yeah. And the decision to become a professional musician probably happened earlier on than most people would arrive at that conclusion, just because of the enjoyment, like the amount of enjoyment you had, and you grew up around it and were able to see.
Yeah, it's the only thing I ever wanted to do. I've been stuck with it. And people talk about music choosing you, or you chose music, and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of people, I know a lot of the, iconic and great musicians I've been able to interview, I've been able to interact with, I've been able to perform with, people that I've befriended. They'll say similar kind of things. And it sounds like some kind of weird thing to say. I really am stuck with it. I think I would be totally miserable without music. And music has paid every bill. It led me to my wife. It has facilitated almost all of the meaningful relationships that I've ever had. And it has been a therapist. It has produced tremendous amount of peace, meaning, purpose, beauty, and music has facilitated other things that I want to do. My tagline in my social media is musician, professor, social commentator. And it's in that order. It's the music that facilitated anyone wanting me to teach them my proficiency at music. And then it was the platform as a professor and as a musician that has facilitated anyone wanting to hear what I have to say on social issues and a variety of other things. It says in the Bible, your gift will make room for you. Music has been that gift that has definitely has done that for me.
That's a powerful answer, and I really appreciate you sharing all that. I feel like I just heard a sermon as far as like all the just the positive things that are associated with being a musician. Wonderful. Yeah. So next question is, what has been the focus of your practice sessions in the last month? What are you working on like these days as a practicer, and what instrument? Because I know you play like everything. So
most of my, we'll say, saxophone, flute, clarinet, I consider those to be my primary instruments. They're certainly the first instruments. Saxophone, of course, is the very first instrument. I started on alto, and then I began soprano and tenor saxophone, and then I started on flute when I was 10, and then clarinet I started when I was 16. I sort of clunked around with the piano, just kind of finding things, and in my writing and stuff, I started getting a lot more deliberate and serious about my keyboard playing. actually after I finished my master's degree. I mean, I kind of did the obligatory keyboard courses and, it kind of went in one ear and out the other ear when I was an undergraduate, and didn't really have to do much on piano other than facilitating my writing when I was working on my master's degree, which was saxophone performance with a cognate in composition. But then after I finished my master's degree, I went on a tear where I was spending several hours a day practicing piano for a couple years. And I developed a lot of facility, and at least enough facility not only to boost my writing got a lot better because of better keyboard skills and more efficient, but also I developed the capability to be able to take a keyboard gig at a church, because that was actually that was an agenda that I wanted to decode that, because the way that, the economy works, the way that churches work, especially black churches, is if you can play keyboard, then you're much more impervious to the effects of economic decline. If you play saxophone and you're playing in church, you're the first person that that they say, hey, we ain't got no bread.
Right.
And I think largely playing rhythm section instruments can benefit in that way. I started playing bass in 2005. And what caused me to start playing bass, I've been blessed to play with tremendous bass players since I was very young. There's footage of me playing Moment's Notice on my YouTube channel, and I was 13, I think. Rodney Whitaker is standing behind me playing bass, right? I played with another great bass player after him, Marion Hayden, Detroit-based, both of them. Peter Dominguez was one of the bass players. Kirk Cronky. I'm forgetting a lot of people's names. I hope people will forgive me, but I played with a long list of excellent players, and a lot of really named players like Victor Wooten, Bill Dickens. It's a long list. So the thing is I kind of secretly was admiring the instrument, and in my writing, I was always told that I wrote good bass lines. And this was before I played bass. And so I was like, in 2005, Victor Wooten came to Ohio State, which I started Ohio State in 2004. He came there to do a master class for the double bass professor's studio, Paul Robinson. Of course, I already knew Victor from having played with him and recording with him and things. But he came to town and he did a master class, and I audio recorded that master class. I still can't find the footage, but I was so inspired when I left that master class that I went right to a music store and picked up a bass.
Beeline just straight to this music store.
Right to the store. And it was a 5-string Samick that I never really warmed up to. And I ended up trading that in for a 6-string Galveston. It had passive pickups, soap bar pickups. I can kind of still see the instrument. And I took it to a great guitar tech, who's also a great guitar player, named Craig Phillips. And he set that thing up to make it play like a dream. I spent a lot of hours watching videos, Victor Wooten videos, Bill Dickens videos, any kind of bass videos, and practicing all day.
Yeah.
I practiced. I was practicing, I got up in the morning, I'd practice some, do the stuff that I needed to do. In the evening, I was practicing 3-4 more hours, falling asleep with the instrument, stuff like that. And I was just really consumed by the instrument. Still practicing the other instruments, still playing, of course, all the time, but bass definitely was my focus. And then let's see here. This would have been at about 2012 or something like that I started playing guitar. Maybe it was more like 2013, 2014. I started playing guitar, and the same sort of thing, a lot of hours practicing guitar. In my development as a musician, learning an instrument has a dramatic impact on my writing for that instrument. And that's not, I didn't think of that. That's an old classical composer trick. Seems like Mozart probably really could play clarinet based on the kind of writing that he did for clarinet. And typically composers would locate a teacher, they go take lessons with the teacher, they learn the instrument, and then they would write music.
Yeah, it's not coincidental that these cats would write a flute concerto or a trumpet concerto without knowing the instrument, or just doing it because they felt like they had to or whatever. They had a passion on some level for those axes, right, and had to have some kind of knowledge of it, otherwise they wouldn't be writing the great things that came out of the pen.
But the kind of stuff that I practice now, especially on what I call my primary instruments, saxophone, flute, clarinet, it's very project oriented, right? So I'll devise a sort of strategy to make sure that I can play well whatever the music that's on the docket, and whatever skills or concepts that I need to play well. I've been doing a number of theme-based concerts with my quartet. I just did a Cannonball Adderley Nancy Wilson show earlier this month at the same place and with the same band. I've done a Wayne Shorter show. I've done a Joe Henderson show. I did a Christmas show. But doing those kind of theme-based concerts kind of gives you like a laser focus on stuff that you need to develop. And it's less sort of abstract at this point in my development, other than if something feels weird, going back and maybe working out, scales or patterns that I'm getting some clunkiness or something, or something's not speaking the way that I want it to. I'll go back to that stuff frequently. But really what I feel like is helping me to get to the next thing is theme-based projects. Yeah. So that's kind of what I focus on these days.
Yeah. So I guess in the last month, you'd say you've been shedding Cannonball Adderley, Nancy Wilson tunes, or just tunes from that album. But just familiarizing. Right. Yeah. Awesome. Did you play tenor on that gig, or did you just play alto?
All alto.
Nice.
Yeah. And this is interesting because, I started on alto. I really identified with alto for the most part. And I played tenor for a long time also. And I switched to tenor in big band when I was working on my undergrad because the tenor players got more solos.
Right.
Same thing that everybody does, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like you may have made a similar sort of transition at one
definitely.
point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting too. Like a lot of the legendary players, I was talking to J.D. Allen actually. J.D. Allen went through the same sort of development. I think he started on clarinet, then he went to alto sax, then to tenor. Coltrane, same thing. Clarinet, alto sax, tenor. Doug Lawrence, a great tenor saxophone player, tenor one in the Count Basie Orchestra. Same thing. Clarinet, alto sax, tenor sax. Now, I didn't do clarinet first, but alto was in that sort of that lineage. Now, some people, they just stay on alto because that's what it is. I had some different motives around that, and perhaps I would have stayed on alto if it was 40 years ago.
Right.
When there were enough gigs to support someone that just plays. They say, oh, all I'm doing is playing alto. All I'm doing is playing tenor. I just play clarinet, or I just play. When there were actually enough gigs to support players of a certain level to just do that. But that's not where we're at now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I one thing I just always think is amazing about most of the acts you pick up, or every one I've heard you on, is that you bring your sound to the instrument. You don't let the instrument like tell you how to sound. Like I don't hear any limitations happening from the instruments. I'm sure they're there, and you find them like in your playing. But like it's always so amazing to hear you pick up. Like there's footage, lots of stuff on YouTube that you can find. But there's one that stands out where I think it's like some other blues a concert you're playing in Columbus, outdoor concert, and you play this ridiculous tenor solo. But then later on, you pick up the bass clarinet and then shred on the bass clarinet too, and it's like very similar vocabulary and language. You don't hear any limitations from the instrument, but bass clarinet is a very different instrument than tenor sax. There's all kinds of limitations that exist. So it's just it's always been inspiring. I love the answer of allowing your gigs to dictate your practice sessions, and really because you work so much, that totally checks out and makes sense, and just kind of allowing the tunes to push you in the direction of what you're going to be focusing on so that you sound as good as you can when you get to the gig.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Okay, so next question is, who is the last, it could be saxophone player or just musician you've listened to and it really blew you away, kind of beside yourself with what you heard?
Yeah, I don't know that I've had that experience for a long time. I mean, that's not to say that I'm not. It's interesting. I mean, there is some stuff. I mean, I'm always interested in seeing this sort of the next crop of musicians, young musicians. It's pretty fascinating the number of virtuosos that are being generated with just technical proficiency on the instrument. Very, very young, being able to play stuff that is challenging, demanding kind of stuff. And I think that's a testament to the pedagogy, the development of the pedagogy, and the access to YouTube in particular. I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's the same as a seasoned player, right? Because a seasoned player has a story to tell in addition to technical facility to facilitate the telling of the story. I think sometimes we get overly enamored by the facility and we forget what the story is. So there is that, but there's a lot of great younger or youngish players out there. But I still love going back to, all of the stuff that I grew up on, and it sounds different now because I think I'm at a different place in my musical journey.
Yeah.
One advantage to playing a lot of different instruments or picking up a new instrument is you can go back to an old recording and now you know something more about the other instruments. So then the recording, it like increases a dimension or something,
Yeah.
It's like 5D, 6D, when you
Right.
listen to it, and it's great. But there's a couple bands in particular that I really dig that are actually more guitar driven bands, and they're very sort of obviously jazz influenced, but sort of stretching the sort of norms of certain genres. In particular, I like this genre. What is it called? Progressive metal, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So progressive metal. Now, progressive metal is not just like it's not just a headbanger's feast.
Right.
There's some of that in there too, right?
Right.
But there's a couple bands in particular that are very interesting. One of them is called Animals as Leaders, and the guitar player's name is Tosin Abasi.
Cool.
His name's Tosin Abasi, and Javier Reyes. They're the two 8-string guitar players, and they have sort of, between them and a band called Meshuggah, that's why this sort of extended range instruments have become sort of a thing. All of their recordings are great and are really stretching the bounds of what you can play on guitar, which you can do in a live show with a trio. I mean, they do play with some tracks and some other things like that in ear monitoring, light shows, video, on all that kind of stuff that's happening at the same time. So that's very interesting. And there's another guy named Pliny.
Guitar player also?
Also a guitar player, Plini. And again, now I was watching an interview that Rick Beato did with Pliny. It was actually the whole band. Apparently, the leader of the band, his dad is an acoustic bass player. He's an upright bass player, is how he described him. Gives me a sense that he's a jazz musician, right? So it's interesting just to see how jazz is influencing later, the sort of next generation of musicians, given the technology that we have at our disposal now. And I continue to be impressed by folks like Victor Wooten, and you got to love Chris Potter, of course. You have to love the usual folks, but Mike Brecker is pretty good too.
So he's all right.
And this guy named Steve Cortica, he's not bad. But there's a lot of really fine players these days, and a lot of really well produced music. So there's a plus and minus with eliminating the what do I want to say, the gatekeepers to producing records, to putting records out. The good thing about the gatekeepers is that it was a quality control.
Right.
Okay, so you knew only a certain level or a certain kind of thing was going to get through. Okay, good, bad, or indifferent, it did serve that purpose. The good thing about eliminating the gatekeepers is that now everybody has access, and the technology means that you could record a studio quality, project in your basement, right? Or in a practice room that you rent. So there's incredible possibilities. The problem, though, is that it seems to be equally or more outmatched by a bunch of stuff that's not very good, right?
Sure.
So you've got stuff that is really, really top notch, the baddest stuff that exists, and also a bunch of stuff that is pretty kind of dog crap. It's not very good, and so that's the sort of challenge, the wide range of things that you end up with. But there's also a lot more really good stuff. You just have to know where to look for it. So I think that's a positive thing.
Yeah, that's a great distinction. I love that you mentioned the guitar, like you called it prog metal. I haven't really heard of that genre before, but I've noticed in the last couple of years that I've known you, interactions I've had, you do tend to lean towards guitar as being your intellectual stimulator. That's the instrument that I get the sense that you're more fascinated with out of all the ones that you play. Is that an accurate assessment, or is that...
Okay, so I have an approach to practicing that is related to that sense of things. So I have this non-redundant practice strategy. Non-redundant practice strategy. So what that is that I have listed out at one point, I've listed out all of the non-redundant skills that I need to have, non-redundant aspects of physics that I have to overcome to address each instrument.
Yeah.
Right. So for instance, saxophone and clarinet and flute, if I was going to practice those in the same practice session or in the same day, which, ordinarily I would, then flute is the one that the physics are totally different with respect to producing sound.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm going to practice long tones, I'm not going to probably practice long tones on all three instruments. I'll probably practice long tones on two of the three.
Mm-hmm.
I'll practice long tones on saxophone or clarinet, and I'll practice long tones on flute. Okay?
Because you do it on clarinet, you don't need to do it on sax because it's a similar operator.
Right. Now this is because there's not unlimited time. If there's unlimited time, then I practice everything on everything. Right. But since there's not, you're stuck. So you have to make choices. And that's the purpose of this non-redundant thing. So on bass and on guitar, there's a great deal that's in common with respect to where the notes are on the neck. Okay, now you have a third at the top, in the thinner strings, you have a third in there, which throws off all of the fourths, which changes some things. But still, even with that, with respect to finding where the notes are, you have a great deal in common. But one thing that is totally not in common is on a guitar, you're going to tend to play with a pick, especially certain genres. Right. And on bass, I'm going to tend to play with my fingers. So I played bass first, and then I played guitar. So when I first started playing guitar, most of my practicing on guitar was not practicing scales and a bunch of stuff like that. I did practice that stuff, but I knew where the notes were, and I could fret the notes. The issue was the pick. So most of my practicing was picking exercises, and then also chording. That was the thing that was different from the way that I approached the bass.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I spent most of my time practicing that. So I've got a bunch of non-redundant sort of exercises. So guitar is the most recent instrument that I picked up. And so it is still receiving more bandwidth as far as the way that I'm thinking about things. Because you have to achieve a critical mass, a number of hours of practice in, before you can sort of say, okay, I've gotten to a certain number of hours and now I can start to reduce and go to sort of maintenance mode on those instruments. So a number of my instruments are more in maintenance mode. That doesn't mean that I'm not covering ground, because still conceptually I'm still growing. I still think of all kinds of stuff that I can't play. Every time I play, I think of stuff I can't play.
Right. And
I record myself frequently. So then I listen back and it's like, oh, I couldn't play that. Let me work that out. So then the next time that occurs to me, and since I'm not a robot, right, it will occur to me because I have a personality, right?
Yeah.
So then that's an organic way to improve your playing. That's why one reason I tell my students, always record your practice sessions. Not your practice sessions, aspects of your practice sessions, but every time you perform, you should record so you can listen back. What worked, what didn't work, and what not, and what ideas can you develop further?
Man. Yeah, I love to hear you conceptualize all this stuff, because there's not many people that can play that many instruments, but that's a very, very useful thing that you told me many years ago too. And I it's not that I ever forgot it, but it's just nice to be reminded of it, to really target those, you call them non-redundant areas of the instruments, because you can save so much time. And while you're practicing one instrument, you can be practicing a couple at the same time because they've shared those skill sets. That's such a great thing. So yeah, that all checks out with your continual growth as a great musician. So thank you so much for sharing that, man. I feel like it's like getting a postgraduate lesson. So this next question is totally unrelated. We got two more after that, but this next question is, what is your current saxophone setup? And that's tip opening, mouthpiece, reed strength, and horn. And you could say alto and tenor. I know you play all of them, but
yeah, we could just do alto and tenor. If folks want soprano and bari or whatever, then they can get in touch with me. On alto, for now, we'll just talk on the sort of jazz and commercial side. I use the same setup, jazz commercial side. So I'm playing on a Van Doren V16, an A9 with a medium chamber, and I'm playing on a 2.25 Leger American cut with a Francois Louis ultimate ligature. And as I've gotten older, I relied more and more on a bite guard on the top of the mouthpiece. I didn't have to do that when I was a kid and growing up, and I got to a place somewhere in my 20s, probably late 20s, where my top teeth start to become very, very sensitive. And now it's kind of like sometimes they're sensitive, sometimes they're not, but I always have like one of the black rubber bite guards. And at one point I had devised a strategy to make them wear out less quickly because I tend to bite holes in them, right?
Yeah.
I would put like this, there used to be a bite guard that was really thin and clear and really tough. And I used to put one of those on top of like the rubber one, and I could get it to last for a long time.
Yeah.
But I haven't been able to locate those. I just don't remember what they were called even. So that's on alto, and I'm playing on a LA Sax Big Lip X. That's what the alto is.
Are they still? Is LA Sax still making horns? Did they like disband for a little while and then come back?
Sort of. Basically, what happened is so LA Sax got bought by the guy that owned the Brass Win. I think he got voted out or something. I can't remember what it was. So he got out of the music store business, but he still wanted to be involved in music. So he went out and he purchased LA Sax, and the first thing he did was he made a couple custom models, because LA Sax started to get a reputation for being sort of like a flashy horn, but not necessarily a great playing horn. So a lot of smooth jazz cats like those horns who have like an American flag on the bell or something like that, really vibrant looking horns.
I saw some cool ones, man. Yeah, I was surprised that they did go out of business because they were the only people doing that. So yeah, it's good to hear that they're back.
Yeah, so I play on that horn, and it's got some unusual things. It's got rolled tone holes. It's got these huge parabolic tone resonators in it. So it's built like a tank, great key work, has some similarities to like a P. Moriat, but with some other stuff, proprietary stuff. I also play on a Big Lip X on tenor also. So the alto and tenor are the same model horn. The tenor, I'm playing on a T9 hard rubber Van Doren, and I'm playing a Francois Louis Ultimate Ligature 2.25 Leger American cut. It just happened to be that way. I think that the numbers on the Van Doren mouthpieces make it such that you generate basically a very similar amount of resistance, the same number on the reed in the mouthpiece. So that's a kind of interesting thing. So that's what I'm playing there. Nothing too adventurous. I was playing on Gary Sugel mouthpieces, and I dig those. Those are great mouthpieces, and I kind of grew out of that.
Yeah.
And then I grew back into it and then grew back out of it again. So sometimes stuff changes as you're getting older. And I just got on Amazon and just ordered a T9 Van Doren hard rubber, and it came, and I threw it on and started playing it. And that's what I've been doing for the last, several years. So
yeah,
I dig it.
Right. Yeah. I love the consistency of the Van Dorens, and they're not, they're not going to break the bank, and
nope.
You lose one, or you something bad happens to you, you get the exact same one and not even
have
to think twice about it.
Right.
Yeah. So next question is, what was one of your most favorite gigs you've ever played, and why was it your favorite, or why was it one of your most favorites? And this could be, because of the music you were playing, or because of who you were playing for, the venue you were playing at, whatever it is that stands out. And I don't expect you to narrow it down to just one, because, I'm sure you play a ton of great gigs. So
yeah. Maybe I'll give you like 3 or 4 or something like that.
Sure.
Still, what stands out, I don't remember a whole lot about it. I just remember the good feeling, and getting to meet Ray Charles was when I opened for Ray Charles when I was 14 at the Michigan Festival.
Wow.
That's still a big highlight. The audience was like 100,000 people or something. It was ridiculous. That was just a great moment.
That's amazing.
I don't remember a lot about the music. I don't remember what we played. I mean, I know my record was about to come out, my first record, which came out when I was 14. And I had like a mock-up of it in my hand that I could and I talked about it a little bit from stage. I remember that, but yeah, that one still stands out there. I had some opportunities to do some national television. I was featured on CBS Sunday Morning. I was also, I played on the Phil Donahue show when I was 19, and Branford came out. He was the MD for the Jay Leno Tonight Show at the time.
Yeah.
And he came across as a surprise to meet me right on. I mean, it's part of the show, and he
Yep.
comes out and we talked a little bit, and that was great. And I've had an opportunity to interview him, and I've known him since then and played with him with the Columbus Jazz Orchestra and some other things. And you want to talk about somebody that's willing to say controversial stuff.
Yeah.
That was a very, very easy interview that I did with him.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very easy interview because he's just full of knowledge and is not afraid to say things that are challenging, challenging prevailing narratives. So anyhow, that was great. And then a couple things that are much more recent. One of them was a tour that I did with the Count Basie Orchestra. It was a 2-week European tour that I did. It was before the pandemic. I actually, I'm kicking myself because, I got called to do, and this was the first time since the pandemic, I got called to do a European tour with the Basie band in this past December, and I couldn't do it. It was a 2-week tour. Yeah, it was a drag because it's just a beautiful moment, and just the history of that band and the camaraderie in the band, just the seriousness of approach of the music. It's just that's still a really big moment. Of course, I love playing with the Columbus Jazz Orchestra. I love playing with Byron as much as possible. Great musician. That's a great band. But the last thing I'll say is I was working at a big church in town. It was one of the biggest. Well, it's the biggest church in Ohio. Mm-hmm. May not be anymore because of the pandemic, but still in operation and everything. And I recently wrote four string quartets that were premiered Christmas Eve simultaneously at 4 different campuses. And it was a major deal because 4 string players had to be booked at 4 different churches. So it was 16 players, and it was the writing, it was the producing mock files, it was the collaborating with somebody to book the stuff. It was all of that, and I got to be in one of the services or a different couple locations to see that played. But it just reminds me that when I was working there, it was a church called Vineyard Columbus. I was a creative director there. There was something called the Vineyard Masterclass Series, which was something that I brought to the church. And so we would bring in really great, top-notch, instrumentalists, a vocal coach, dancers. And the dancers that we brought in just happened to be my wife's dance company. And it still is one of the great moments in my life to be able to collaborate with my wife in a church service in that way, where all of the music was that I wrote all the music, all of the arrangements, did the rehearsals. There was master classes associated with everything. Of course, my wife taught the dance master class, and then there was dance associated with each piece, and all the rehearsals and just the entire process is something that that's still really, really high up there. So, a great moment.
Those are awesome, man. Yeah. It all sounds, very, very gratifying on a high level, and all very different experiences. So thank you for sharing all that, man. It's so great. I knew it would not be an easy answer for you, especially with all the great stuff you've done. The last question is an easy one because you already pretty much answered it. But the question is, what other instruments do you play, and how did they help your saxophone playing?
Yeah, so saxophone, flute, clarinet, piano, bass, and guitar. Those are the instruments. Of course, I play MIDI wind controller also, and I consider composition as sort of an instrument too, because like I said, I wrote these 4 string quartets. I don't play violin or viola, but what I wrote was being played,
Right.
So with singers, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it was the strings were providing the rhythm section. They were the rhythm section, essentially, with singers over top. So it was a pretty cool. It was a really cool project. I really appreciate that opportunity. One of the guys that I interviewed on my Conversations with Doctor Thunder series, Joshua Miller, who is now the worship arts pastor there, he's the one that called me to do that project. And shout out to him for bringing that together, giving me that opportunity. It was a lot of fun.
Is there a place that we could find that online? Did any get recorded? Or
I put one of them on my YouTube channel. I'll send you the link, and yeah. But what was I going to say?
Just
You
all
know,
the instruments, yeah, that you play and
so
how they.
I'll say, because I've got to get going. I got to pick my
I
son
know.
up at school. But I will say one thing. It's a strange way that an instrument that doesn't seem to be related at all to another instrument definitely improved an aspect of that other instrument.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, in general, of course, playing any other instrument, especially if they function in a different way, their role is different, it's going to increase your overall musicianship. Okay, so there is that general thing. But here's a specific thing, especially with bass and guitar. There's a lot of contorting and stretching and stuff that you have to do with your left hand. That that there's nothing on saxophone that you have to do. That's anywhere similar to that sort of contorting and stuff. You kind of
Right.
you're trying to keep your hand in like a comfortable position, like you're grabbing something, you have that like sort of natural bend in your fingers, right?
Yeah.
And you have to do some rotating. Bisbee flat causes you to have to do some rotating, and there's some stuff like that in the palm keys or whatever. But there's nothing like that.
Right.
And one thing that I noticed almost immediately is all of the stretching that I had to do, especially to achieve the wider spacing at the end of the neck, was translating into uh, a great deal more comfort and facility in my palm keys in the front E and F key
Yeah.
or fingering, which is
Hmm.
really strange. You would not think that would have any relationship, but it's almost like an ankle weights sort of scenario
Yeah.
where from doing something that is beyond what you have to do and developing fluency and strength in that way, it actually boosts everything uh, that hand is doing.
Yeah.
So that was a really strange kind of thing that, from a technical perspective, the bass in particular seems to have improved my left hand technique.
A great byproduct of learning another instrument and
Yeah,
something.
it's a very strange thing. It
Yeah.
it does not seem like it would have any impact at all.
Hmm.
And I think part of it is also that whole um, anything you do is working everything. It's like if you go to the gym and you do curls, you're working your pinky toes.
Yeah.
If you do bench press, you're working your legs.
Hmm.
If you do stuff that doesn't seem like it's related, but there's really no true sense of isolation. There's no true isolation.
Yeah.
Everything is really connected to everything else.
Yeah.
um, and that has to do also with, I believe, the what makes up a person. In their in the West, we tend to separate things for the purpose of analysis, and it's very good for the purpose of analysis. And so when you talk about a human being, usually we talk about spirit, soul, and body, though I think those are important things to understand, which what it is that we're talking about and what's at work and what's functioning and giving us some clarity. The soul and the body don't exist without the spirit. The spirit doesn't exist without the soul and the body. The soul doesn't exist without the body and the spirit. The body doesn't exist without the spirit and the soul.
Yeah.
Nothing exists without each other. So and I'll say this last thing. I'm into physical fitness and stuff, and the health of the body is related to the health of the spirit and the soul. And there's a lot of stuff that's going on in our society today, which I think is very unhealthy, which I
Hmm.
think in its infancy was targeted at trying to help people that to feel better about themselves, that maybe uh, didn't have the sort of physical look that that is ideal or whatever, that it's normalized in society or whatever.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, what we've done is we have began to encourage people to just be satisfied with stuff that is going to literally shorten their life, and to indoctrinate people with this sense of sort of duality that doesn't actually exist. There is no duality. There is no, well, the way that I look, my physical appearance, that's not the real me. I'm the me that's inside. That doesn't actually exist. Every part of you is every part of you.
Yep.
And so if you're not satisfied with some aspect of yourself, you got to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it reflects on other aspects of yourself. And if you want to dominate in life, if you want to get to that next level, you want to improve, if you want to be the person that you were born to be, that you were created to be, you have to fix those fundamental maybe issues with discipline or whatever it is that you're dealing with, and all that stuff just manifests in with the way that you look, the way that you behave, and everything. So there is no time where you as a person, any aspect of you is not related to other aspects of you, because there is no true isolation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that, man. Man, Dr. Shawn Thunder Wallace, thank you so much for your time and for this great interview and your insights. It's super valuable to anybody that gets to see this. I hope everybody watches it.
All right, man.
Yeah.
You be well. God bless you.
You as well, man.